we understand that there are women, people of colour, people neurodivergent, who are ultimately underrepresented in the roles that they are doing and also in the leadership that they see around them. And so we're here to help those people grow, become leaders, and to connect, so that we create a future where everyone is part of the design of the world that we live in around us. You know, like sometimes we talk around the fact that, for example, the sort of crash test dummies that are used for car safety are modelled on the male physique, not the female physique, for example. So there's just sort of fundamental things missing in the culture and the world around us that we want to see change. What do? We run online and in-person events. So last year we did about 26, 27 events. I've lost count of how many we've done this year, but we're on track for doing the same, if not more, again in 2026. We've got a very active Slack community with over 800 members worldwide. We do run a mentor program that needs a little bit of love and attention at the moment, but it is there, and we've got a lot of leaders in the community that are around to help you, either through the Slack Ask Us Anything or from having an ongoing relationship. But most importantly, we are a not-for-profit community. So our promise to you and to members is that we are free now and free forever. There are lots of us that worked tirelessly in the background, and we're always welcoming new people. This is out of date. There's probably about 10, 15 people that have sort of come in and are helping us on various things like fundraising, our content strategy, our AI automation strategy. There's so many things happening. And we've even got a design system now, like who knew? Just figuring out how to use that. So we're always welcoming new members and we're always welcoming new volunteers. We've got themes this year. All our events are around power, belonging, voice, and inclusive innovation. It's worth noting that this is our first event on AI. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Got a couple of really cool events coming up. Feel free to scan that QR code if you want to join us. Our next one next week is with Ed's incredible wife. So Catherine Duquette is going to take us through finding your power. We'll be doing that in person in London, Bishopsgate next week. So welcome to come along if you want to. It's a 10 till 12 event, that one. So yeah, just a quick intro into why we're doing an AI series of events. This is the first in all of those. So at Female Product Lead, what we are about is all about that lens of inclusive product leadership, right? So everything we do is around clearing the path to inclusive product leadership. And what we see is a lot of product leaders and product people grappling with the pace of change that AI is bringing, alongside questions about skills, relevance, and just what leadership looks like next, or, you know, as things are evolving. So as part of our mission to clear the path to that vision, to the outcome of inclusive product leadership, we want to create practical, honest spaces that help our community build confidence and capability, not just keeping up with change, but leading through it. And that's why we're so delighted to have Ed with us today. He's the founder of Hustle Badger, and he spent the last 2 years building products with AI across spectrum, from customGPTs to production applications. He's also trained hundreds of product managers and business leaders to do the same. Prior to Hustle Badger, Ed held senior product leadership roles, including CPTO positions at companies like Depop, Job and Talent, FutureLearn, and Flood. Today, he's going to help us cut through all of the noise with some practical frameworks for understanding all of this. So yeah, over to you, Ed. Very, very happy that you're here. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Bex. Right, let me just check I can get my screen shared. Okay, can you see that?
That's perfect. Go for it.
Super. Great. Well, yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks very much for having me, Bex. I'm going to give this talk on the AI landscape and sort of, you know, a few reflections on what I know from you know, teaching people different skills. Right. Sorry, I'm just trying to find how I flip my slides. You've already told everyone what I've done. There you go. That's my CV basically in visual format. So yeah, I've been a product leader, but three and a half years ago, I set up Hustle Badger to teach people core product fundamentals and also increasingly AI skills. We now run 3 main AI courses. So there's one on prototyping and general building, one on kind of evals and building agents, and one on Claude Code. And so the stuff that I put in here is effectively a distillation of those courses, or and stuff that we've learned, both putting those courses together and then teaching people those skills. By the way, I've got quite a lot of content, so I'm going to try and like go through it at a sensible pace. But if you've got any questions, then do give me a shout. I can't actually see the chat and the slides at the same time. So, but I will kind of try and keep flicking back and forth between the two, so I can keep an eye on the chat. I mean, just to say, like, firstly, if you haven't realized, it's a great time to build stuff, and it's a really exciting time for people who are product managers who may have had to rely on engineers in the past to kind of put your thoughts into kind of reality. And now you can go and build a lot of stuff yourself. So a couple of examples here on the left hand side at the top. This was someone in one of our Build with AI courses, built their own site to go and scrape jobs across the internet and kind of do personalized applications to them. So they built their own kind of not application tracker, but almost like their own version of that, the kind of facing into application trackers. Someone else built a route planner for when they were sailing, so it would tell them when the best weather, when the best tides were from moving from anchorage to anchorage, and so on. I mean, and these are not engineers, right? These are people who've kind of like picked up the skills and then a week later are kind of building stuff like this. That's really, really fun and useful. And this is something that I run myself. I'm effectively more kind of small business owner than product manager now. And so I do a lot of sales calls. I often have to figure out, jumping on the phone with someone, exactly what we talked about and where we're at. So I built this little shortcut in Claude, which then goes and looks up all my call transcripts, all my emails, all my calendar events, and then gives me a briefing on them, who they are, every single kind of touch point I've had with them, where we are in the conversation, and what I, either need to clarify with them on the call or in the next email, which just saves me kind of like a ton of time. There's three kind of categories of tools I'm going to talk through today, which is how I think about it. And there's obviously kind of AI tools outside of this, but like these are the kind of the general tools that I think that PMs are using day to day, and I think are kind of like worth most of your attention. So the first one, AI chatbots. I put in this any kind of general LLM that is browser based. So ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude.ai, great for general purpose problem solving tools, basically. Second one, second category I've got then is agent building platforms. So these are platforms like N8N, Make.com, Gumloop, Zapier, Relay, where you can create your own workflows and your own agents, generally with drag and drop components. And the third one are then local agents. So this is where you download something, an application onto your computer, and that application then makes calls to an LLM. So Claude Code is probably the best known of these, but that would also include Cursor, Codex, Anti-Gravity. There's a lot of developer tooling or stuff that started out as developer tooling in this category, but it's becoming more and more valuable as for knowledge workers. And I strong belief on my part that we're going to see more and more of this going forwards. I'll talk a little bit about why. I thought, all of this stuff kind of has the same underpinnings, which is one of those things that I think most people kind of like know in theory, but is also just worth kind of really restating and clarifying. All of these foundational models, whether you're talking about, Opus on Anthropic, or you're talking about the latest, GPT, 5 point whatever, they're basically just dealing with plain text. Yes, there are image generators, but what I want to say is like there's not kind of like different models for different file formats. They're basically taking your user prompt or your skill or your instructions or your custom GPT or whatever you call it, and they're converting that into plain text. And then they're chopping up the plain text into tokens, into chunks, and converting those chunks into tokens, which are arrays of numbers. So it's an array of numbers that again get sent to the foundational model. The foundational model is then pretty much like fancy autocomplete. It goes like, given this array, this kind of set of tokens, what would come next? And then it generates another array of tokens, which then gets translated back into text and sent back to you. So the reason that these models are really good at coding is because, computer code is basically plain text. The reason that they like Markdown and CSV files and JSON files is because those are basically plain text. And as soon as you start getting into other kind of file formats, like, yes, they can do docx, they've got converters there, yes, they can do PDFs, they're effectively relying on other libraries to convert those into plain text for them, so that they can process the actual text component. The other thing kind of worth mentioning is that, because it's all plain text, it's all kind of just getting stuck together and sent as an API call to the foundational model. So everything from your user input, any files you upload, any skills or instructions, if Claude MD file, if you kind of using Claude, that all just gets stuck together into your context window. So again, there's not really a difference from the model's point of view there between attaching a file into the chat and just copying all the text and sticking it into the chat. The model's going to see that in basically the same way. The other thing to kind of bear in mind is that, you've probably noticed that the longer you have a conversation with AI, the worse the output becomes. That's known as context rot, and it's a fairly well documented sort of artifact of LLMs. So it, as in, like, you can run experiments and you can just prove it statistically. So this is not you imagining things. Like, the LLM does actually get worse as you fill up this context window. It's why large context windows are valuable, but also, if you get above 50% in your context window, you should probably be thinking about asking the LLM to summarize the conversation, output it as a file that you can then dump into a fresh conversation to kick off a fresh conversation with a fresh context window and kind of refresh, the amount of thinking space that you've got. That said, that all these three categories then work in this way, so that they're just different ways of calling these foundational models. So an AI chatbot is basically the easiest way you can interface with a foundational model. It's just a very simple browser interface built over the top of it. So you put in your prompt, you send it to foundational model, and then you get a response back, which you can then see in the foundational model. The agent building platforms are a little bit different, because what they allow you to do is to put together workflows. So just a series of steps, and every step will be a different API call or a different tool call. And some of those calls then can be calls to foundational models, to LLMs. Then the third way, then the local agents, these are also making calls to foundational models. And I've kind of, I've mixed up the icons here, but the point is not it's OpenAI or it's Anthropic. It's like, it could be either, right? It doesn't really matter. The difference with these local agents is that instead of going to a browser, you're doing it on a desktop app, and that desktop app has got a little bit of software kind of around it that allows it to read local files, allows it to write local files, it allows it to use the terminal, make API calls to other apps through MCPs, and it can also have kind of built-in instructions or built-in skills as well. And so using tools, using NPC servers can result in blowing up your context window quite a bit, because effectively for every tool that you want the LLM to know that is available, you've got to have a description of what that tool is and what it can do. So if you've got 20 tools connected to Claude, it's going to read the descriptions of all those tools every single time you have a conversation with it, even regardless of whether you need it or not. So if you do have lots of tools that you might want to use, then it's worth being clever about when they're switched on and off, so that you don't, you might not always need all of your tools in every conversation. Okay, I'm going to talk through these in a little bit of detail, each one. And this is going to be a bit of description about how they work and just some practical tips for using them. And I'm going to start with the AI chatbots. So as you probably noticed, like if you ask kind of like a very basic question to a chatbot, you get a very basic answer. Or, maybe sometimes like a smart answer, but it's just a kind of very beige answer. It's kind of like average. It's almost by definition the average of all the content out there on the internet that they've been trained on. So it's just not very exciting or opinionated, and you can get really good results out of them, but that just depends on the context that you put into them and how you work with them. So what I think really makes a difference are two things. Like, do you have the right context in the conversation? And can you work step by step and kind of break tasks into chunks, and work through those steps then one at a time? So we talk about, and I say right context, it's not as much context as possible. If you put in as much context as possible, you're going to blow out your context window. You're going to reduce the amount of context that's like kind of left, and the performance of the LLM is going to go down. But some ways that are good for kind of getting context into your into the LLM really quickly. Firstly, like voice. So most AI products you probably notice have a little microphone icon. I use Whisperflow, which is absolutely amazing, and I just have it mapped to the function key on my keyboard. So anytime I hold down the function key, I'm automatically dictating, which is by making it so frictionless for myself, it means I use it quite a lot. It's faster to input thoughts into your computer. And because you're dealing with an LLM, you don't need to worry that much about structure or spelling or grammar, because it will figure all that stuff out yourself. So you can just kind of brain dump stuff into the conversation, and it will understand what you're talking about. So this is just like a super kind of productivity hack. Yeah, one I definitely recommend. Second one then would be like using images. And this one, yeah, whenever I get stuck doing anything, I just screenshot what I'm doing and I drop it into the conversation, and ask Claude, ChatGPT, whichever LLM I'm using, like, what do I do next? And the image recognition now is incredible, and it's really good at spotting stuff. So I was building a workflow on the left hand side here, where I wanted to make an API call to Spotify. I do not have an engineering background. I don't really know how APIs work. So, I was kind of like making a bit of a hash of this. Couldn't figure out why it was going wrong, but I kept getting errors. So I just screenshot the whole thing. And that is actually the screenshot I put into ChatGPT. And you can see ChatGPT came back and was like, okay, look at this parameter. Like, basically in this bit of the field where you've got client credential in the singular, you should have client credentials with an S on the end. And this was a year ago. So even a year ago, image recognition was good enough that it would understand what I was doing. It would spot a typo in the parameter of an API, and then help me correct it. So whatever you're doing, I just screenshot it, drop it into the chat. It's amazing. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about, if that was not clear. Great. Okay. So one of the things that's come out in the last, I don't know, 6-9 months is that even on the web-based browsers is that you can create these projects where you upload files, and so those files effectively, give the LLM a lot more context about what's going on, and that's a really good way of meaning that you don't have to kind of repeat yourself. So getting kind of key context into a format that LLMs can really easily consume. And again, if that's something like Markdown, which is pretty light on tokens, pretty efficient, but it's human readable, great. That's why everyone's using Markdown. But you can see here, I was kind of doing a little test where I was like, great, I'll put in, my tone of voice, some guidelines I've got on AI writing, some kind of like, previous posts I've done on LinkedIn, and I'll see how good it is with a very, very simple prompt at coming up with ideas. So you can see, like, what should I post about today? The LLM would not even know what I was talking about. It'd be like, post on social media, post through the mail, like, it would have zero context with that kind of input without those files. But with those files, it suddenly knows who I am, who my target audience is, how I speak, and it can make some, non-horrible suggestions about what I would post about. So getting those files kind of like locally can take a little bit of setup, but really well worth doing. Another technique that I really like is getting LLMs to do the work. I mean, what are they there for if not doing kind of like really boring grunt work for you? So even if I know about a topic, I will often effectively prime a conversation by asking it, what does it know? It's the kind of classic kind of teacher move. Ask your students what they know about a topic, but so I will do this quite often. I'll say, like, what do you know about Hustle Badger? Because I cannot be bothered to spend 3 minutes telling an LLM what is in the, what Hustle Badger does, and what our pricing is and all this sort of stuff. I can just get it to research it, and then I can continue the conversation when it's got that kind of in the context window. The other thing I quite often do is I say, like, hey, I want to talk about this, and I've got some rough ideas, and here they are. Ask me some questions so we can kind of flesh this out, or we can think through this. So getting it to ask you questions is a really good way of, avoiding some of your internal biases, because you're getting a fairly neutral interviewer asking those questions. So it often asks you questions where you're like, oh yeah, that is kind of a good question, which I hadn't thought about. But it helps you flesh out ideas really, really quickly, and it's I find it a lot more fun. Responding to questions in voice, again using voice, rather than writing a document from scratch. So the final thing I do here, and I do this with the local agents as well. All these techniques, by the way, work with the local agents as well. They're not specific to the browsers. Is I kind of follow this step-by-step process for how I brief LLMs on complex topics. So the first thing I will do is I will do a kind of like stream of consciousness ramble using dictation, where I'll talk about the problem I want to solve. I'll talk about the any references, other why am I thinking about this, or people that have done it well, or products that are kind of like interesting. I'll give it any kind of ideas that I think, oh, maybe we could do it this way, maybe we could do it that way. Is this a thing that we should think about? But I will then absolutely explicitly like tell it not to do anything, not to solve the problem, but to go and do research and tell me what the options are. Then what I'll get back, hopefully, is a bit of research where Claude's gone, or ChatGPT's gone, like, right, I've looked into this, and I've looked at these things you told me about, and I've thought about this a bit. And what I've come back with are, here are a few different approaches we should take, and here's really what the trade-offs are. If there's anything there I don't understand, I'll then quiz it and be like, great, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? But that's generally enough then for me to select an approach and to get it to come up with a plan. So I'll get it to say, like, right, what are all the steps here? And again, then I will not let it kind of like, even if I'm getting the LLM to do all the work, I will just make sure it only does one step at a time, so that we can step in every step basically and work through those one at a time, aligning at each point, like whether we're getting like the results that we want. And this process, I use it for coding when I'm not a coder. I use it for thinking through strategic issues or marketing issues when I don't really know what I'm talking about. It helps me kind of, it educates me on what we're talking about as we do it, and it always gives like way better results than doing it sort of on my own, or doing it in one step. Okay, so that's agent building platforms. There's a couple of people I'm getting kind of like a bit of sound through, like coughs and things. So if you're not on mute and not asking a question, please do go on mute. Thank you. So agent building platforms. Yeah, I kind of put these on the easiest way to think about these, right, is on a spectrum from deterministic to probabilistic software. So deterministic is kind of, pre-generative AI, if this then that style of logic. Every bit of software before 2022, whenever it was, is basically doing this. And if you've ever built a workflow in Zapier or even Monday or any of these tools, that basically you line up your steps. Every step is using a tool or kind of transforming data in some way, and you get your output. So example here, you might have you get a new lead on your website. It's in a kind of input box, input form. You just take all the field inputs and stick them into your CRM, and then you have an email template where you take the name that they inputted and the email address that they inputted into the contact box, and you send them an email. Very, very basic, like no personalization apart from the name. You can get more probabilistic here. There's kind of like two big categories. You've got what I call agentic workflows. So you've still got a fairly linear flow, but you're getting AI to do little things in between. So maybe you're doing some, a Google search or some research, and then using that to fill out your CRM. Maybe you're getting an LLM to kind of write the email with very tight guidelines. So it's actually truly personalized and not just a kind of form email that you send out to people. These are really, really powerful and fairly easy to keep on tight rails. So you can create these, almost anyone can create these and get them working like fairly well. You then go, if you go over to the right-hand side, you've got these kind of like, true agents. So if anyone's talking about agents or AI agents or harnesses, I mean, they're all kind of talking about this sort of thing, basically, where the setup is slightly different, because what you're doing is you're saying to you're putting an AI or an API call in the position of deciding what happens next. So you're saying to Claude, or you're saying to OpenAI, hey, what do you want to do next? Are you going to respond to the user? Are you going to do a tool call? Are you going to look up some files? And the AI is going to say, like, I think I'm going to do a tool call. I'm going to make an API call to your calendar, and I'm going to search through your calendar and see what's there. Right, I know what your calendar's like. Am I going to respond to the user? No, not yet. I want to make another tool call, right? And then it's going to, whenever it's decided it's done, then it's going to do some output, which might be getting back to you, or it might be, whatever is next in the workflow. So these are highly variable in the output that they can generate, because the LLM is a probabilistic system, not a deterministic one, and it's deciding what happens next. But they're also very, very powerful, right? So I'm just going to check the chat. Is there a difference between using a local dictation, device dictation, or something like Whisperflow? Yeah, so the difference there is, something like Whisperflow will generally sort of lightly edit what you're saying before it outputs it. So it will take out ums and ahs, and it will put, if you say, hey, I want to talk about 3 things, it will put them into a numbered bullet list. Whereas if you are just dictating on device, you will just get the actual kind of sounds coming out of your mouth kind of directly translated into words. So for that reason, I prefer Whisperflow, at least on the kind of free version. So what are these, going back to the agents, what do the agents look like? They all start with a trigger, right? Which is like, when do they start doing things? So that could be, you tell it to start, but more often it's on a schedule, or it's when something else happens in another app. So it's, when someone makes a purchase, or when someone sends you an email. And you then have a bunch of steps, I would say. So each of these steps, you can see here, this is kind of good illustration of like, well, what's a step? Well, go and get the 10 most recent emails, go and get the 10 most recent meetings from a calendar, look up their LinkedIn profile. Each of these are step, right? It's under the hood, it's an API call. But you can think of this as kind of, going and interacting, just transforming the data, or kind of getting some more information somehow. Now, some of those steps might include kind of routing logic. So this is, loops, delays, if else nodes, or, conditions, that sort of thing. So like very basic programming and logic kind of steps. So that allows you to do things like, get all the guests from a meeting and then look up each of the guests individually, which is what this workflow is doing. And you can see it's writing me a little briefing before meetings about who's coming. As I mentioned, you can have a kind of an AI step in here as well. So what this does is it basically, before I have a meeting, it will go and look up everyone who's a guest in that meeting who is not internal to Hustle Badger. It will look up all their emails. It will look them up on LinkedIn, and then AI will write me a little briefing and send it to me as an email. So this generates meeting briefings for me super nicely. So that's a fairly straightforward, like linear workflow, as I mentioned. So this is what I would call an agentic workflow. These can obviously be like much more complicated, where you've got loops and tools and different flows, and you can basically make these as complicated as you want. And that's where you start getting into more agentic or pure agent behavior. But this is an NAN gum loop. That they're great for kind of making these because you can visualize every step and you can see, you can basically audit what's going on, as you see data flowing through step by step. So you know exactly what's going on, and they're really easy to go in and edit. Where you can get Claude to build this sort of thing for you, but then it's much harder to see what's going on behind the scenes. You've probably heard of evals. So evals are effectively QA for probabilistic systems. So when you build, deterministic software, if this, then that, then you have a bunch of test cases and you say, right, here is my input. Do I get the output I expected? If so, my test is passed, because for deterministic software, the same inputs always give you the same outputs. For LLMs and other probabilistic systems, though, that doesn't work, because with the same inputs, you can get very different outputs. So how do you know if your system is actually doing what you want it to? How do you know if you change it, if you've made it better or worse, or you've just got a different output? That's where evals come in. So the basic way that evals work is you gather like lots of test cases. So anywhere from 10, 20 to a few hundred. You then go through those manually, and you look at how well the agent so you run all those test cases through your agent, and you then see the response from your agent, and you go, okay, is this a good response or not? And if it's not a good response, why is it not a good response? And you do that as a human expert, kind of judging the output. Those kind of clusters of errors that you see, you then design what's called like an eval for, a test for, right? So if you're seeing that the output is just too short and is not detailed enough, you might have an eval that says, hey, what is the length of the response? Is it over 300 characters? Right, that would be a fairly basic eval. Okay, but that would be then a test which you could run against your test cases, or the outputs of your agent came from your test cases on an automatic basis. So you can test for that failure mode then in an automated way. So you generate generally a small basket of evals, a small basket of tests for the main failure modes that you're seeing. And then what you're doing is every time you make a change to your agent, you're running that test suite. So you're basically going like, okay, I've updated the agent, I've made some tweaks to the system prompt, I've given it some more tools. Let's see how it performs against all my test cases. You take all your test cases, you run them through V2 of your agent, you get all the responses from the agent, and then you run your responses through your evals and see how they perform. And your evals, you generally want those to be pass or fail. LLMs are quite good at kind of doing binary classifications. They're not very good at doing, graded scales. This is, where does this come on a 1 out of 10? Don't do that. Just do binary. But you can then turn your binary kind of pass rate into a metric, and you can see if your metrics improve from version to version. So that's basically how evals work. So when do these things make sense? I mean, like I said, like agentic workflows, these are really good for kind of simple internal processes. So adding things to spreadsheets, doing support ticket classification, doing little meeting prep agents, these sorts of things, and anyone can build them and get them to work quite well. And you generally don't need evals to make these work. You can just kind of eyeball it and correct them as you go. Agents, on the other hand, this is like a lot more complicated. So this is generally reserved for stuff that you sell to customers and your really core internal capabilities. And to build this, you are going to need, I would say, like, I wouldn't say developers, because you could build one of these yourselves. But if you build one of these yourselves, this is something you're going to have to spend a lot of time and effort building and tweaking to get sensible output out of it. And you're going to have to maintain it. So that's why I say it's a technical specialist type of thing. And because of the effort involved, that is why it only makes sense for like really high value stuff. You're not going to build a full agent for something where a simpler like agentic workflow or just a regular workflow works. Cool, just checking the time. All right, local agents. So final category then, Claude Code and the like of it. So these are on your computer. They can see and edit your local files. They're generally connected to lots of tools, and that combination of capabilities makes them really, really powerful. Few use cases here that I use them for. So I will often, when I'm making edits to the Hustle Badger site. So we used to have an agency helped us out on Hustle Badger site. We don't have an agency anymore. We just have me because it's faster and it's cheaper. What category does customGPTs fall into? customGPTs are kind of chatbots, effectively. They're just saved prompts that go into your go into an LLM. My favorite agent building platform is Relay. Yeah. So yeah, prototyping. So I mean, yes, Claude can kind of generate a single prototype for you, but it's really powerful when you say, like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. You ask it to research, what are some different ways that you can display things, and then you get it to mock them all up side by side. So I had to kind of cut up this page so it would all fit on my slide. But basically, I created a single HTML page that explored different ways we could show our course cards on Hustle Badger. And yeah, having asked Claude to what were some options? So it came up with the options. I was like, great, yeah, those sound like options. I wouldn't have thought of all those options. Show me what they look like. And it immediately showed them me what they look like. So this is a really, really fast way of exploring different ways of building things. I think I mentioned this. I showed you this one already. So this is my little kind of sales helper where I stick in someone's name or email address, or kind of like, who did I speak to last Tuesday type of thing, and Claude will go and give me who they are, the timeline, what do I need to do next? So this really helps me, prevents me having to go and search across all my emails or my granola transcripts, my to-do list, and figure out what do I need to do. This is a huge time saver for me. So really, really good for knowledge work. And obviously this is just one example. You could do this for other things. The other thing I use Claude for, and I see more and more people doing, is creating their own mini tools, their own personal software. So yeah, I mentioned Markdown is a great format for working with LLMs. I spend a lot of time working in Markdown. You can use Obsidian or tons of other Markdown editors. These are not hard to find, but I wanted one that worked just for me, just the way I wanted it. And it took me about 15 minutes to make this in Claude. So I wanted it browser based. I wanted it working on my local files, which is kind of an odd combo. But Claude kind of whipped that up super quickly. And so I've effectively got a Markdown editor that works a bit like Medium, and only I can use. And then the one on the right, Claude every day kind of goes through my to-do list, adds things, prunes things based on my calls, on my emails. That's great, but my to-do list was in a Markdown file, and so it lacked the functionality you'd usually get with a regular to-do kind of app. So I couldn't drag and drop stuff up and down to change the priorities. I couldn't cross things out. again, getting a little bit of background noise, which is quite distracting. So if you could go on mute, that'd be amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I again got Claude to kind of like make something that is effectively a markdown file under the hood, and it's edited by Claude under the hood. But then I've got all the kind of drag and drop functionality that you kind of expect from Trello or something like that, which is, for me, it's great. And again, it took about 20 minutes to make. It was super quick. So a few, when I talk about Claude Code or Claude co-work, I use that as a bit of a catch-all. There are lots of different kind of setups here that all work virtually the same. If you haven't got any of these, then I'd recommend co-work is probably the easiest to get going with. But if you're using Codex, that's the same thing. If you're using Cursor or Anti-Gravity or VS Code, this is all basically the same thing. And you do not need to be using Claude in the terminal to get this kind of functionality. That's terminal is where Claude Code started out, but it's not very user friendly, and so I wouldn't recommend it unless you want to feel like a hacker, which is also cool. And occasionally I do that, so I can feel like I'm in the Matrix. So start with desktop if you don't know where to start, but also don't worry about it too much. Think about if you've got an existing script subscription with Cursor, with OpenAI, with whatever it is, just stick with the existing subscription you've got and use whatever tool set works with them. It's fairly easy to adapt. I mean, like, yes, you'd need to copy across your skills or whatever, but this is not such a big deal. And you can ask, anything you get stuck with, of course, you can ask Claude, you can ask ChatGPT to help you with, how do I migrate to Claude Code? How do I migrate to Codex? They will help you do this. So what can Claude Code do? How does it do all this stuff? So firstly, it works in your world, right? So it can see your files, it can see your apps. You don't have to spend time copying, pasting stuff around. So that is kind of like, it has all that context already. You don't have to kind of put it there. Second thing is you end up kind of writing, skills, which is effectively like saved prompts that live inside Claude, but it calls them when it needs to. So the longer you use it and the more instructions, the more skills you add, the more it knows how you work, how you expect to do things, which is super useful. Because it's got more context, then it will generally spend more time thinking about things and more time working through things before it asks you for a follow-up question, before it thinks it's done. That means you're going to end up spending more time waiting for it. And because you're not doing stuff for longer periods, you're going to want to run multiple conversations in parallel, which you can do. So quite often, if I'm working, I will have like 2 or 3 conversations in Claude open where it's doing completely different tasks. But I'm doing those both in parallel then, and then saving a bit of time. That's what I kind of described. And the other thing that I put on here is that Claude can also take action on your behalf in a way that the browser-based agents can't. So depending on the permissions you've set up, of course, but you can set up Claude so that it can send emails for you or add stuff to your calendar for you or kind of write scripts for you on your laptop or write files for you. So it can actually not just kind of tell you how to do stuff, it can actually do stuff for you, which is a pretty big change as well. So quick note, you've probably seen on LinkedIn people talking about, oh, I've set up Claude as my chief of staff, or I've created as my personal operating system, or anything along these lines. Like, it's all basically the same. And what people mean is that they have set up Claude to help them with their most common and most important bits of work that happen day to day. So your kind of to-do list or like deciding what to do every day is a really obvious use case for most people. And they've got then a combination of local files. So that's context here, tasks.md, which might just be like, it's basically a text file, which just says like, here are all the things you need to do today and has them in a list. You've then got a daily plan skill. So this is a set of instructions that tells Claude, hey, every day I want you to check my calendar. I'd probably get it to check my emails. And based on what you see there, cross off any tasks that I've done and I forgot to cross off. And if there's anything that I've committed to doing that is not in my to-do list, add it in. So you've then got a system, almost like a module, that helps you with your planning your day that is, or I won't say it's like automated, it's augmented by Claude, right? And you're using this combination of kind of like local files for memory, for context. So you're saving stuff into local files. So it's there for future conversations. You're using your tools and different apps in a really smart way. And Claude's helping you get your work done. But you can do this for all sorts of things. So you can do this for, personal CRM, for doing research, for improving your chief of staff system as itself, for running user research, whatever it is, any kind of like workflow that you're doing regularly, you can kind of set up in this kind of way. I just say, if you haven't started coding with Claude Code, then this is really like a kind of mental barrier, not a technical barrier now. If you've got Claude Desktop, you can put in a super simple prompt, build me a classic version of the Space Invaders game, and it will create it for you. So anything you can describe or you can think of, it can create the software for it. And if you then want to deploy it to the internet or share it with other people or put a paywall in front of it, like anything you can think of, just ask Claude how to do that. I am now like got my GitHub set up so that when I tell Claude to do stuff, it automatically pushes to GitHub, which automatically triggers like a new build on Versa, which then updates the website. I mean, like, I had no idea how to do any of this 3 months ago. And I did not take like a computer science course. I just said, repeatedly again and again said like, hey, Claude, I'd like to do this. Can you help me? Can we do this? How do we set this up? What's a smart way of doing this? And, it's just transformed how I spend my day and what I do my work on. Okay, so where are we? 10 minutes still. I kind of like run through all that super quickly. I see there's some questions in the chat, but let me stop sharing and I'll focus on answering questions now. Right. What is my favorite agent building platform? I really like Relay. So that's relay.app. It's really, really simple and easy to use, very easy to get going. They've got a free tier. So that's the one that I start people out on when I'm in our Build with AI course. Combo of Obsidian plus Claude Code is a game changer. Yes, it is. Obsidian's great for kind of like looking at markdown files and editing markdown files, and it syncs to your phone, which is quite nice, and does some other stuff. And it also has a free version. Does something like Prompt Cowboy create too much info in a prompt? I don't know. I haven't used Prompt Cowboy. Being slightly cynical, I'm not sure I see the point in a service that kind of writes a prompt for you. Certainly not now, because that is just effectively asking an LLM to write the prompt for you. You may as well just like do it in the existing chat and say like, hey, I want to do this. Can you write a better prompt for me? Yeah. And so if you want, just ask ChatGPT twice, like say like, hey, I want to do this. Can you write a better prompt for me? Copy it and put it into a new chat. That's effectively what you're doing. Do you think you can get away with the pro tier if you want to build with Claude Code, or do you need Max? That depends on how many conversations you are running simultaneously and how much coding you are doing. So if you are doing a bit of coding in the evenings, one conversation at a time, you will get away with a pro account. If you are building 3 things simultaneously, because you're like, oh my gosh, AI, then you're going to blow through your credits pretty quick. So I ran a workshop yesterday and we had like 30 different groups and they all had pro accounts and we were building stuff for 6 hours. and one person blew through their credits with a couple of hours to spare because they were building like 3 things at once, and they were already like a power user effectively, but everyone else was fine. What one thing would you advise a PM to do to make them more hireable or competitive in the market? Get into the habit, get one of the local agents and get into the habit of using it daily and asking it how to do stuff. And particularly like if you're doing stuff on a repeat basis, asking it how it can help with that stuff. Again, I just think all of knowledge work is going to go that direction. And maybe it's not going to be Claude Desktop, or maybe it's not going to be exactly that format, but anything that you learn about how to use those tools is going to kind of carry forward to whatever comes next.
Can I ask a follow-on question to that then?
Yeah.
So how would you then advise a PM to talk about that? So if they're going into interviews and trying to promote themselves either internally to get a more senior role, or just they're on the market looking for jobs, is there a good way to reflect that knowledge and that way of thinking in terms of what that means for them as a PM, like how it makes them more effective or more full stack, if you wanted to use that terminology?
I don't think you need to think about that, because that will come out naturally in the way that you talk about things if you are using the tools, or people will ask you explicitly. So it's more something, because you'll be like, oh, well, I'd look into this or that. Oh, like, actually, of course I get Claude to do it for me. Like people who use Claude a lot, like they just make those little jokes, they make those little asides like very naturally. So I wouldn't think about kind of having to deliberately signal it. What I would think about is, if someone asks you, okay, so what's the most impressive thing that you've built with Claude Code, or what are skills that you're using every day, you've actually got answers to those things.
Yeah. So it's more around that authentic comfort with AI that comes across if you use it regularly. Cool. Thank you.
Have receipts. Yeah. Have receipts to what you're going to say. Do you change models based on the task you're doing? No, very rarely. I just have Opus on for everything, and I have a Max account. But then, as the co-founder of Hustle Badger, I get the business to pay for it. So I'm in that kind of lucky position. If you're on a pro account, I'd probably do everything on Sonnet to start with, and then I'd bump it up to Opus if I wasn't happy with the results. Yeah, I mean, I don't pay too much attention to the models because they're all getting better all the time. They're all really good. Like, just fundamentally, probably at some point we're going to see a big shift towards like local models. So you're not making API calls, or you're making API calls, but to your own server. But that's probably 6 months out. Yeah. Super. I think that's all the questions.
There's one more, I think, from Heba.
One more.
You see that? Is Claude Code
is Claude Code different to Lovable Replit? Is the benefit of Claude Code that it has more functionality? Yeah, so I used to have 4 categories, and I used to include Lovable and Replit and AI prototyping tools as the 4th category. And I basically cut them out recently because I was like, I don't think they're important anymore, or not going to be important. I mean, why do I say that? So the case against them is that it is now so easy to build stuff in Claude Code that, Claude Code, which used to be a kind of pure developer tool, that even someone without an engineering background can use it. The case for them is that actually building the website is only one part of what they do. They also deploy it to the internet, and doing that with Claude Code is a bit more tricky because you have to find someone to host it, and you have to probably stick your stuff on GitHub. So you've got a couple of steps there which take you a bit more time. So the benefit of Lovable and Replit is they are very slightly more user-friendly in terms of getting going, and they are like a lot more user-friendly for kind of shipping stuff if you want it to go live. Coming back to the against thing, like I see a lot of teams who are like, oh, we're going to prototype with Figma Make, or we're going to prototype with Lovable, but then they're like, well, how do we get it really, really close to our existing code base so it's got our existing design system? I'm like, well, you don't use Lovable, you use Claude Code, and you get a real copy of your code base, and you build off that. So I'm seeing a lot more design. I'm actually seeing like really, really strong uptake with Cursor and Claude Code from designers, because they want fidelity with the live site as well.
Cool, thank you, Ed. We're quickly running out of time. Any final thoughts from you?
Not really. I will just grab my LinkedIn. I'll stick it in the chat if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me. Then I post about this stuff quite a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Hustlebadger is a fabulous resource. I often say to my teams, especially new to product people, to go and have a look to see what they can find. So, I'm always grateful to what you've set up and to what Hustlebadger offers. So thank you. So a real quick wrap up from us. As I mentioned earlier, we are a not-for-profit. We are a community interest company, and we get measured by the impact that we create. So please, just quickly in the chat or follow that Slido link that Catherine shared, just tell us how this event has helped you, what impact it's provided for you, how you think you might use this knowledge either with just for yourself or for your teams. We'd very much appreciate that, because it really helps us in our future success as a community. So just take 2 minutes, less than that, to tell us how the event has helped you today. Just a final wrap up. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for offering to do this for us. Very exciting, very useful first event in our series on AI. The lovely Heba is also with us, and she's helping us curate a number of other events. So watch this space. Follow us on Luma to get notified of new events, or join us in our community on Slack, where you'll also get notified of events coming up. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a brilliant afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Ed.